Greetings. This is Jan Spencer here in Eugene, Oregon. I'd like to share with you a slideshow about creating a preferred future. This is the first of a three-part series. This particular first slideshow, we're going to take a look at capitalism and the consumer culture. And we'll do also a preview of the second slideshow and the third slideshow, those also on YouTube. The goals of this presentation: encourage and motivate others to create alternatives to capitalism and the consumer culture, provide useful and positive info for conversations with others. You can advocate as well, to show real life examples of what a preferred future might look like, and to provide practical and usable information for both social and urban paradigm shift. What are the motivations for paradigm shift? Planet Earth cannot support capitalism and the consumer culture. And for many of us, the consumer culture is not a desirable condition in the first place. Certainly, economics has been a part of the human experience from the very beginning. Personally, I'm fascinated by anthropology, particularly the Phoenicians all over the Mediterranean. The Dutch, something like 1611, were credited with the first more or less modern stock market. Capitalism and the consumer culture I consider to be a cargo cult. I'll have a few more comments about that shortly. I consider the consumer culture is one of history's most remarkable examples of social engineering. It's time for humans to move on, and we have many tools, allies, and assets to work with. But I'd like to share several pretty hard-hitting critiques of capitalism just to get us started here. This will take maybe 15 minutes, but it's really important to understand why capitalism is not a partner for creating a healthy, green, peaceful future. External costs are a reality with our economic system. External costs mean that what we pay for goods and services doesn't cover all the damage those goods and services do to public health and to the environment. They're baked in to capitalism, the external costs. Capitalism, as we know it, would not exist without externalizing the costs. The environment, public health pays those external costs. Healthcare, pollution, problems capitalism or affluence makes in other parts of the world, a dispiriting urban landscape. The military exists to protect capitalism. Informed choice is another part of capitalism's mythology, the idea being if you give the buyer the correct information, then they can decide which product that they're going to buy, what works best for them. But this is closely related, of course, to external costs. When the price doesn't reflect all the damage that's been caused, say, for example, gasoline, the price that we pay doesn't cover the cost of the air pollution, the water pollution, the blowouts in the Gulf of Mexico, the cost of medical care for automobile accidents, climate change, the landscape, you name it. There's lots of external costs to gasoline, and they don't show up in the price, and that doesn't allow there to be an informed choice of what we buy. Economic efficiency. Efficiency is another one of the mythologies of capitalism. And the idea being that when all goods and factors of production in an economy are distributed or allocated to their most valuable uses and waste is eliminated or minimized, capitalism likes to think of itself as being efficient, but the products of capitalism are almost anything but efficient, considering, of course, the automobile. You have a 4,000-pound automobile with perhaps a 200, 300-pound load of person or cargo. Most of the energy, the thermodynamics of an automobile tell us that it is the opposite of efficient. There's many, many other examples of how our economic system is extremely inefficient. And this is another good example of inefficiency in our economic system. When you consider there are tens and hundreds of thousands of different kinds of jobs, there's different sectors of our economy. And when you really take a look at those jobs, you'll find that millions and millions of jobs exist to repair the damage caused by millions and millions of other jobs. For example, one of the best examples, of course, is healthcare. And once again, automobiles, car wrecks, pollution. There's all kinds of professions, all kinds of products that exist to help clean up the environment, to help repair the victims of automobile accidents in the emergency room. Again, millions of jobs exist to repair the damage caused by the products and services of millions of other jobs, and that is extremely inefficient. The magic hand of the marketplace. The ideal is something like this. Through individual self-interest and freedom of production, as well as freedom of consumption, the best interests of society are fulfilled. I would not think that climate change is in the best interests of society, nor junk food, lots of different kinds of products, different types of pollution. These are all products of our economic system, and they're not in the best interest of society. As a matter of fact, they cost an enormous amount of money to deal with. Another aspect of the economic system, a common term we're all familiar with, gross national product. How much activity is there in the economic system? I think the GNP of the United States right now is something like about $18 trillion. It's enormous, of course. And there's a lot that goes on in that economic system. And there's a lot of good stuff that goes on in the economic system as well, absolutely. But we've grown up with GNP, and the whole idea of the economic system is to get bigger, for there to be more products, for people to consume more. And this has been the measure of our success as a society and an economic system, is how much stuff people consume. And it's a propaganda, essentially. We've grown up with it. The dominant GNP metric has greatly diminished our capacity as individuals and society to imagine and construct alternatives to capitalism that are healthy for people and planet. And this is another really important point to me. The fact that products and services exist that we know damage public health and damage the well-being of the natural world. Lots of products, we know they cost lives, they degrade public well-being, and still they're easily available. Go to your corner convenience store and it's like a museum of unhealthy food. Of course, we're aware with the prescription drugs. Certainly, I would consider that homelessness is a product of our economic system, feedlots, crowded freeways, the dead zone at the mouth of the Mississippi River. These are not mysteries. These are all known. There's a cause for these conditions, and it's fine with the economic system because all economic activity contributes to gross national product, and we're told that's good. This is another look at the expression of our economic system. Capitalism, above all, is have economic activity, and that activity doesn't have to be bad, but it's no coincidence that some of the least desirable forms of economic activity are also the most profitable. And this graphic here compares Atlanta, Georgia here, and this is Barcelona, Spain here. They are in urban footprint. This illustration is in scale. Barcelona's this size. This is the size of Atlanta. Okay, well, the two cities have approximately the same population. This is capitalism as we know it, 25 times larger than Barcelona. Barcelona is a very dense city, even by European standards. But an urban footprint like this, this is what automobiles look like. This is what suburbia looks like. This is what compact and urban space looks like that can facilitate public transportation and less use of resources. The footprint of the average American manifests in this comparison between Barcelona and Atlanta. Of course, another aspect of our economic system is how it concentrates economic wealth. We all know about this issue. It's discussed, it's written about. Not much is done about it because the system is controlled by the people who have the most economic wealth. There's a direct relationship between economic wealth and political power, of course, social and political power. The common statistic is that something like 20% of the wealthiest Americans own something like 80% of the stuff. And even within that 20%, the 1% of the richest own 40% of the nation's wealth. And of course, historically, that is a recipe for social, political, economic instability. And we've already had small previews of that. The movement, the Occupy movement is an example of a pushback on this arrangement. Back in the 70s and the 60s, the alternative counterculture was an early pushback. I think historically, we're going to be seeing a lot more pushback on this phenomena of so few people owning so much. So the common denominator, we have lots of environmental problems, we have lots of political and economic problems, public health, social problems. Capitalism is the common denominator of all of these issues. And there's a little bit of humor here. I enjoyed making this graphic right here. There's a little humor, but it's kind of a dark humor. Actually, it's really a dark humor, but there is some humor. During World War II, when the American military went out to the Pacific and set up bases on these different islands out in the Western Pacific, out towards Japan and New Guinea and this part of the Pacific Ocean. It set up bases, radar bases, military, Air Force bases for planes to land. The Americans showed up with these big ships, and out came all of this stuff. And the local people were just amazed to see it all. And of course, they're captivated by it. It's like if a flying saucer landed, you know, in our neighborhood, we'd be pretty amazed by it. Well, that's kind of something what happened here during World War II in the Pacific. And then when the war ended, all the stuff went away. The ships came back, they loaded up most of the gear and they left. And the locals were just kind of left there thinking, well, where did it all go? We sure liked it all. I mean, it's seductive, absolutely. All the tech, the Jeeps, the planes, the lifestyle, all that stuff was extremely seductive to the local people. So what they thought was if they simulated what they saw, that somehow that's the cargo cult, if they reproduce that behavior, then all that stuff comes back and they can see all those cool objects and gadgets and stuff. So of course, this is a military simulation right here. Well, I consider in terms of what a cult is, a cult manifests particular types of behavior, the freeway and all the people commuting to their jobs. I think it's kind of something similar to this. The symbology of the flag and the saluting. This is a local person here, all in the uniform. The US military exists to protect the cargo cult. The US military exists to protect our modern cargo cult. And even this virtual reality setup right here, it has its own counterpart. Homemade fetish and high-tech fetish perform their respective functions, kind of distractions really from what needs to be done to create a successful society. And of course, a number of well-known politicians have been credited with this particular statement. The American way of life is non-negotiable because it's such a good deal for the people who run it, for the people who control the political and economic system. They're making a lot of money, they have a lot of power, and they want us to continue participating in their system, even though their system isn't in our best interest. That's why I'm doing this slideshow, is about creating alternatives to their system. And of course, there are other choices to be made. Moving towards a preferred future, of course, an enormous task. Are we going to get the job done? We have to try no matter what. And to me, I think we'll either get the job done or we're going to wish we had. An honest and responsible economy would not externalize the cost. Everything will cost a lot more. People will not make as much money in an honest economic system. The external costs essentially subsidize our affluence and convenience. The consumer culture has severely diminished many social and economic skills for paradigm shift. A term I like to use, we'll see a little bit more of during this series, is economic, political, social, and environmental literacy, as actually having a more clear idea of what the conditions are that we're surrounded by. We have a lot of learning to do, and of course, we have a lot of unlearning to do. I don't think a sustainable future will be a green version of what we have right now. The more people participating in creating these alternatives, the better. And of course, very important, a small but important number of people are already in the act of creating a preferred future. And in a sense, many of these people, I would include myself and a good number of people I know, are spending part-time at least in a preferred future already. So what's a good point of departure? What's a set of values and ideals that can bring people together? These are ones that I find very attractive, and they're no secret. These are the wisdom of the world's great spiritual traditions. They go like care for the natural world, modesty of lifestyle, service to the community, uplift of the spirit, and being accountable for our personal behavior. These values and ideals are a perfect foundation to base a personal lifestyle, a society, and an economic system. Again, the goals of a preferred future: to live within the boundaries of the natural world, to bring out the best in positive human potential, to restore the natural world, an economic system that is honest, accountable, and serves the healthy goals of society. And for the economic system, this would be a 180-degree different role. Currently, the economic system is basically employs society to work for the economic system. In a preferred future, the society is telling the economic system, this is what we want from you to support, provide the goods and services for our ideals and goals, to live within the boundaries of the natural world and uplift of the spirit. So in the preferred future, the economic system is a servant rather than a master. So there's a very useful tool for assessing our behavior, our lifestyles. And of course, the term is ecological footprint. We mostly, all of us know this term, ecological footprint, and there's different ways to measure it. There certainly wouldn't be complete agreement. For example, how many planet Earth would it take for the entire world to live like the average American? This particular organization, the Global Footprint Network, considers that something like for the entire world to live like the average American, we'd need 5 planets for all the resources and the energy, and importantly, to clean up the mess that our affluence has created. Whether it's 5 planet Earths or 3 or 8 or 10, we are consuming too much. And of course, the economic system requires that consumption. A preferred future, we would be consuming a lot less. We'd be far more efficient. The prices would tell an honest cost, on and on. So there is a way to get a little bit of an idea about what maybe your footprint is. The Global Footprint Network has a footprint calculator. This is online. You can go online, you can find it. It's a survey. It will ask you questions about your lifestyle. For example, it'll ask you, what's your diet like? You're vegetarian, you eat a lot of meat, and you can, the answers are along a gradation, for example, like never, very often, and you can use the slider to kind of judge for yourself how you want to behave, to show your behavior to the calculator. And at the end of the questions, you will be given a number, and this number, given what your responses were, will tell you this is how many planet Earths it would take for the whole world to live like you. And it could be a little bit of a shock, actually. And is this calculator the final word for this particular conclusion? No, of course not. I think it could ask some other questions that would make it even better. And I'm sure people could debate forever, is this accurate or not? But it does have a lot of value. The calculator does have a lot of value. It's a good point of departure to start thinking about our own lifestyles and how we might be able to make changes to reduce our ecological footprint. So there's another aspect of moving towards a preferred future. What do we do with our own time and money? Do we invest our own time and money into a preferred future, or do we invest in the kitchen remodel or the new car or lots of other products that might be fun, but they don't help us move towards a future that's peaceful for people and the natural world? This is a little bit more detailed. For example, a kitchen remodel. What if we applied that money instead to making our own homes and properties more prepared, more resilient, to reduce our ecological footprints? A rainwater system, turning the garage into a living space to increase residential density, taking the grass out and putting in a garden instead, buying a bicycle instead of that new car. Of course, you'd have lots of money left over because the bike costs only a fraction of a car. But there's lots of products and services: edible landscaping, heat pump, solar hot water, solar electric. Instead of investing in vanity, investing in our own well-being, the well-being of our families, our neighborhoods, and the planet. And the economy can respond to these sort of changes. In a preferred future, there will be jobs that don't exist right now that fit a preferred future. And there, of course, are a lot of jobs right now that we're familiar with that won't make the cut to a preferred future. And the sooner people start preparing and making these changes, hopefully this can be done in a way that isn't so traumatic. There's no guarantee of that at all. But again, the more people making these changes, the better. I had a fun time coming up with these illustrations. Imagine that economic, political, social, environmental literacy is on the upswing, and people are really connecting with how they can make a difference, and businesses have to be a part of that as well. So I just took these three situations here and I inserted my own dialogue in this preferred future. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can read these. They're really very humorous, actually. For example, there's the person at the fast food restaurant, the McDonald's, the Burger King, and telling the customer, well, there's a huge ecological price to pay for these meat products. There's the Amazon, there's the water pollution, there's the public health problems. Maybe you might want to consider a veggie burger instead. Or the car salesman saying, well, you might rather move to a neighborhood where you don't need a car instead of buying a new car, and explaining all that. Of course, ideally, these transformations would happen without becoming law, that people just realize that this is what we need to do. I'm certainly not into an overbearing government myself, but if we have that type of social and economic literacy, people can begin to behave more in terms of healthy people and planet by their own decision, not because somebody's telling it. It's in our best interest to make these transformations, and they can certainly be done by our own free choice. This is a comparison, a consumer culture and a one earth culture. You can take a little bit more time to look at this. A money economy, a future economy will certainly have money. Absolutely, money is extremely useful, but a future economy might be a more mixed economy. There could be trades, there could be cooperatives, there could be people exchanging products and services and helping each other in ways that don't necessarily require money. Money will play a big part, of course, but there's other ways to take care of our needs outside of the cash economy. And of course, this preferred future would, again, include a lot of education. And you know, a lot of universities and curriculum do include the early going of literacy. Absolutely. This isn't totally new. We would just have more literacy as time goes on. And that goes for a lot of these ideals that are in this slideshow. Bits and pieces of almost all of this are already happening. We just need to do more. So a One Earth lifestyle, here's just a few pictures to give a bit more of an idea. People would be involved more in their communities. They'd be more participating in the well-being of their neighborhood and their communities. This is a nice picture of that. Maybe we have more time to enjoy a meal with our friends. Shopping will become less of a pastime and more of thrift, and you're buying things because you need them rather than you've got excess money that maybe needs to be used somehow. Of course, active transportation or land use would be really different. That could create a lot of jobs, repurposing, reworking the urban landscape so it becomes less dependent on automobiles. And of course, that leads us to another realm here, of course, land use. I'm very interested in urban land use. And this graphic you see right here, block planning. Block planning is a land use tool that the city of Eugene recognizes. The city here actually tried to get people to use block planning about 30 years ago, and it never really quite got off the ground. But the whole idea is to take an existing block and the people who live on the block and the people who own the property on the block, they create a new idea about how they want to make changes on the block. And the city still has its regulations and its rules. Those don't go away, but with a coherent, well put together block plan, the people who own the property and live on the block can make changes that satisfy the city regulations, that they wouldn't be able to make those changes on their own. The block provides a platform for making changes to the whole block that people would have a more difficult time doing by themselves. And of course, the scale is larger for the block. But also, if you can imagine a few neighbors here in this part of the block, they can certainly do changes and make better use of the land in their own part of the neighborhood as well. I know that a lot of that's going on here in my own neighborhood. We'll even see a little bit of that during these three presentations. But people can do smaller scale examples of a block plan, but the block plan increases the scale. And again, this could create a lot of jobs, remodeling garages, edible landscaping, new businesses. This be a safer place for everybody who lives there. Moving towards a sustainable economy would mean making all kinds of new relationships with entities in the community, in the neighborhood. Almost any neighborhood has schools, PTA, scouts, organizations of different kinds, other allies and assets. Certainly faith communities should be playing a huge role in this transformation. There are even city programs that can be upgraded in our own use in a more ambitious way, to use those programs for more of an ambitious social, economic, and political agenda, like mapping your neighborhood, emergency preparedness, neighborhood watch. We'll go into a little bit more of that during these presentations. positive human potential is our greatest renewable resource. And to bring about a preferred future, a healthier, more peaceful future, we'll call on our positive human potential. And there's enormous amounts of potential. And of course, there are all kinds of volunteer organizations in almost every community already doing important work. We just need to increase the participation and the literacy and the ambition of what's already here. We have a lot to work with, a lot of good stuff already happening. Of course, we just need to amplify that and have a goal and an ideal. So I just want to do a quick little review or preview of the following presentations. They all fit together. There is a continuum here. For the presentation number 2, I'd like to do a little show and tell of my own neighborhood. This would be my quarter-acre suburban property. I'll show some pictures and talk a little bit about what I've been doing on my own quarter-acre property and other locations around my neighborhood. I'm not the only person doing this in the neighborhood. And I know lots of examples around Eugene of people already spending time in a preferred future. This is happening here and there all around Eugene. And actually I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but the third presentation will be a show and tell of all kinds of great projects all over the country that fit within the realm of a preferred future. We'll take a short look at that here in a moment, but this is a schematic of my property right here, my quarter-acre property. Grassed garden, I've got rainwater system, elevated landscaping, increased residential density, all kinds of features. I've been working on this for 20 years. This is just a quick picture. I took out my driveway. This part of my driveway right here, this is what's left of it right here. And I put the rest of where cars used to park to much better use. And this is what my backyard used to look like. This is what my backyard looks like in the summertime. So this is also another great story. I'll go into a little bit more detail in the next presentations. And of course, we need to increase the scale. My next door neighbor and I took out this laurel hedge and we replaced it with edible landscaping. This just shows when we have that kind of literacy and capacity to imagine how could we transform what's already here into something more useful, we need to increase the scale. We, of course, need to go way beyond our own particular property and lifestyle. This is a property a couple blocks away, a larger property. This was a full acre. This is something what the place looked like in the early going. We had lots of work parties, big garden. This particular property has become a really great neighborhood resource. We've had events there, educational workshops, because we took the time and the effort. We invested our own time and money into making these types of transformations. We like to have show and tell, get on our bicycles and roam around the neighborhood and see what people are doing on their properties. And like Bill here, Nick, Heiko, they're giving us what they're learning about their transformation projects. All of these are just a few blocks away. We have we could spend days seeing properties here in my neighborhood. There's quite a few. We had a permaculture convergence at our neighborhood recreation center in 2015. This again in the realm of allies and assets. Our recreation center is an enormous asset. It has the infrastructure to have events there, and those events can be about creating a preferred future. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We estimate 700 people were involved with this convergence, a suburban permaculture convergence in 2015. It was great. It brought a lot of people together planning the event, and it's had a lot of benefit as well. People from out of town came and saw what suburbia can look like. And again, faith communities should be in the vanguard of helping to create a preferred future, and some are as well. There are faith organizations who are playing a big role in helping to bring about a preferred future. But like every other organization, need to step up and be doing more too. A neighborhood association, we'll go into a little bit more detail in another presentation, but many cities have neighborhood programs, and that means there's a neighborhood association that exists to address the issues in the neighborhood. And this is an enormously useful tool. And I'm on the board of my neighborhood association, so I'm familiar with what we can do, and I'm also familiar with what more we can do, but it takes people in the neighborhood to participate. What do we do, again, with our own time and money? And this picture, a little bit more detail. This is the Willamette River on the east side of my neighborhood. People in the neighborhood, including myself, have adopted sections of public property to look after, to improve the well-being of that public property. This is one location along the Greenway that's actually taking place right in here. A person in the neighborhood is kind of the ringleader of Razor Park, and we've had lots of work parties and working with the city. This is collaborating with the city to plant native, restore the natural oak savanna that would exist here. That's really important to repair the urban natural areas. We have, this is the place I look after, is a 65 tree filbert grove that was all overgrown. Again, working with the city to restore the well-being of that filbert grove as a local food source. We're working with that. That's for 10 years. And this takes civic literacy. What does the city have available that we can make use of? The city should not be going out and doing everything. It can't afford to anyway, but the preferred future, people will be much more engaged in community life. And that's what's happening here. We're working and talking with the city about restoring the Greenway. This is the bike path in the Greenway. We had a big public event. Celebrations and having fun is an enormous part of creating a preferred future. So in River Road, again, literacy here at a neighborhood scale. Permaculture is a design system that can be a big tool for redesigning how we live and how we use the space that's available to us. You can look up permaculture online on YouTube, and there's tons of information about permaculture. This is an enormously powerful tool. And of course, here's block planning. In another presentation, we'll go into a little bit more detail about East Blair Housing Co-op here in Eugene. East Blair has ownership of 8 properties, and they can manage those properties in a way that simulates what block planning can look like. We'll go into more detail with that, but a tool room, shared garden space, transforming a parking lot into a party space. We'll go into more detail about East Blair. It's a great story. We've had lots of site tours at East Blair to show what features that neighbors anywhere could collaborate on if they just took the time and effort. We'll go into a little more detail explaining this picture. This is a little chunk of suburbia that in this ideal vision, the fences are gone. There's food growing everywhere. There's really great little gazebos and walking paths, food forest, playground. This is, of course, a wonderful ideal. I'd love to see this. This is my property right here. A few little bits and pieces of this already exist. We just need to fill in with more permaculture and more community participation. Another item that we'll go into a little bit more is transportation in the neighborhood. How can we take what we have now, an automobile dominated neighborhood, and take some of that space that cars are using right now and put that to better use for a healthier neighborhood. We'll go into a little bit more detail with the next presentation. You'll see this graphic again. This is a suburban strip mall about a mile away from where I live, a huge parking lot. And this is the car road that goes through our neighborhood. How could these, the road repurposed for alternatives to cars, and this area repurposed for alternatives to cars, how could these support each other and support the neighborhood in a better way? We'll hear more about that. And this is the third presentation, positive stories from a preferred future. These are great. I've done a lot of interviews. I have a radio program, and people love to be interviewed. So it gives me access to talking with all kinds of people who are doing great projects. They tell me what they're doing. I've learned a lot by talking with people and all over the country, and their stories that fit into a preferred future. And this is one of them. This is from Los Angeles. I'm not going to go into great detail right now, but this is Los Angeles Eco Village. This is a pretty urban location right here. This is the Eco Village. And what are the projects that they have going on? I'll describe in more detail the project to turn a no longer used gas station, an automobile repair business, turning it into a community center. That's a great story. And then this street right here, it's only a residential street. There's not a lot of traffic on this street, but the plan is to turn this street into a pedestrian mall and not have cars there at all, but it can become more of a neighborhood space, you know, for having events and a more aesthetic location. These are great stories. We'll hear more about those. Another one of my favorite places is Kyle Ash Eco Village in Portland, taking a run down drug-infested apartment complex and turning it into an eco village. Part of what they did is they took out the driveway, the parking lot here, and turned it into this big mandala garden. We'll hear a little bit more from Kyle Ash Eco Village. Again, a lot of this is land use. I'm very interested in land use. That is a critical factor, a critical place to make these transformations. These are little parklets. COVID-19 has kind of stimulated, we've got to be outside, but these little parklets occupy parking spaces. And in some places, these little parklets are becoming permanent, little small bits of transforming the urban landscape from car dominated to not so many cars. That's great. We'll see more of this. This place actually called Place in Oakland, California, a community center that people invested a lot of their own time and money into transforming this site. It used to be a cement cutting business. And look at this garden. This is a before and this is now. This is a learning center in Oakland, and every neighborhood should have something like this. When we repurpose our time and money, people in the neighborhood could help support a learning center like this in their neighborhood, create a few jobs at the same time, a learning place where people can learn social, political, economic literacy. This is in Oakland. It's called Place. And you can find it online. Of course, they have a website, tell you all about it. Another great story comes from Syracuse, New York, the Onondaga Earth Corps. And this is engaging young people to learn these skills. These come straight from their website. Train youth for future jobs and careers in environmental fields, empowering young people, giving them more of a future and more of a direction. This is all about social and environmental literacy. These young people are learning these skills that can be life changers for a lot of young people. Every city should have a program like this. This picture here, this is Sunil here. He does suburban farming. He makes arrangements with people with suburban properties to turn their grassy property into a big garden, and then he grows vegetables on the property, and the owner gets some of those vegetables, and then Sunil sells these vegetables at a market, and that's how he makes his living. Not to say this has all been easy. This takes effort to do this, but he's a pioneer. You know, all these people, all these projects are pioneer projects. We'll hear a little bit more. New York City has a program, public plaza program, to take automobile spaces like this. And if the community makes it happen, of course, there's rules and regulations and guidelines. Would take a lot of community participation, but turning a street like this into a street like this. Some of them may be only for the summer. Some of them might be for an event. Some of them might be permanent, like Times Square is essentially the most well-known community plaza. But this is the kind of community building. Even in a big urban place like New York City, there's great opportunities. Pushing back on cars is one of my favorite topics. This third presentation, we'll take a look at some examples of pushing back on cars. This is the Southwest Corridor in Boston. It would have been an 8-lane freeway, about 3.5 miles long, dumping right into downtown Boston. The local people said, we don't want it. Even after the government had started buying land and preparing this for the freeway, the neighborhoods, Jamaica Plain, some other neighborhoods got organized, and they ended up stopping the freeway, and they turned it into a linear park. This is about 3.5 miles long. This is what that linear park looks like now. I've ridden a bicycle on all of it. This could have been a freeway right there. That's a good story. And of course, there's other good stories coming from other parts of the world. The mayor of Paris, France, Anne Hidalgo, part of her platform as being a progressive mayor, is pushing back on cars. And this is something of a view of what a more dense urban neighborhood might start to look like there in Paris, France. Doesn't mean that all cars go away, but cars don't dominate like they do at this point. And then another location that I'm really fond of is Barcelona, Spain, and their super blocks. This is urban transformation at an industrial scale. A number of these super blocks have already been created, and they only have maybe like 500 more to go, because of course Barcelona's a big city, but it restricts cars. Once again, it doesn't say cars can't be here, but they don't dominate. For example, this intersection here, you would have the cars going on the periphery of the intersection, and you would have, instead of all traffic noise pollution, air pollution. The superblocks are turning intersections into public spaces and playgrounds for quality of life and public health as well. There's other aspects to this urban mobility plan too. It's not just streets. It's how can they better use what they already have. They already have buses, suburban commuter trains. They have a metro underground. So it's a more holistic view and set of actions in Barcelona to make their city a healthier place to live. We'll hear more about superblocks, just great. And of course, restoring the environment could create lots of jobs. Imagine all those earth cores working on these types of projects, and to some degree already are, but to have more kids, more of the public engaged in repairing the urban landscape. This is a totally different idea here, but we've got all these wonderful thoughts and models and ideals. How do we get these out to a wider audience? We'll go into more detail in the third presentation, but enough to say right now that as we see, capitalism is the common denominator of virtually all these problems. Most of the progressive nonprofit organizations we're familiar with exist to address these issues right here. The League of Women Voters, the Sierra Club, all these different organizations exist. They have their little chunk that they focus on, but their common denominator is that they're all repairing damage caused by the economic system. In this ideal, how do we get these literacy ideas out to a wider audience is for these organizations to recognize their common cause and work more effectively with each other, because this needs to be a holistic approach. It needs to take in the environment, the political and economic issues, the public health issues, the social issues. So we'll go into more detail in the third presentation, but when you consider all these different types of existing organizations that are working on these issues, there's economic justice, there's health advocacy, environmental, electoral politics, there's international aspects of all this. These groups, if they were working more together, then they could be much more effective in helping each other put out these kinds of messages. So we'll see more about that. And this is an idea that most people would look at and hear and say, would have a hard time imagining the validity or the reason for a truth and a reconciliation process. You know, in some places like South Africa was ruled by the white minority in a pretty brutal way a good part of that time. I've been in South Africa. I've seen this when apartheid was happening. I've spent a lot of time in South Africa, and when they finally arrived to majority rule, a big part of that healing process was truth and reconciliation. There needed to be an accounting for what happened during that time, which may or may not have included punishment, but there needed to be a clearing of the air. And was this a process that was completely successful in South Africa? I think probably not, but it was helpful. It was an effort to come to terms with what happened historically there. I think we need to come to terms with what's historically happened here in our country at the hands of capitalism and the consumer culture. I think there needs to be an accountability for the people who are responsible for climate change and the disequity and the missed opportunities of what human potential has been lost for decades and generations in this country. I think we need a truth and reconciliation process here in this country as well, to deal with and make accountable what this economic system has done to people and the planet here in the United States. So recall permaculture, this is the last picture right here. Permaculture, one of the most important ideals of permaculture is designing for multiple benefits. How can we be smart in how we design and deliver the most benefits? Well, creating a preferred future that fits within the boundaries of the natural world and brings out the best and positive human potential, to direct our resources, our time, our effort, our energies towards this kind of a huge project. We move towards these kinds of benefits. They don't all happen immediately. And of course, we see some of these sort of benefits already. This isn't creating really anything new. It's enlarging good stuff that's already happening. Greater resilience, preparedness, these types of preferred future projects can be good for a local and accountable economy, helps bring out positive human potential, helps people participate, creating a future that they want to live in, the good for the environment, mitigate climate change, public health. Imagine we can take all that money that goes into repairing the damage right now. If we don't have that damage, then we can use that money to invest in positive future. That's a great point I didn't make before. I call that the double benefit. If we don't make the problems, then we don't have to pay to repair the damage. If we don't buy the problems or the projects and the products that create those problems, we can use that money to invest in a preferred future. We'll take a closer look at that ideal. Empower people so they have the opportunity to express the good and the positive that we all have. We don't really have that so much right now. There's a lot of potential that we need to encourage to happen for all of us. Okay, please join us for the other presentations. Those are online on my website as well. You can go to my website, suburbanpermaculture.org, suburbanpermaculture.org, and you can find more information of the other YouTube presentations and podcasts from my radio program, go into more detail with all of these issues. So appreciate your paying attention. Thanks. Have a good one.